Appreciate that. There's lots of people in the background helping out, so fantastic. Okay, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hamzat Erogbogbo. I am a chairman with the North American Explorationists, with the Houston Geological Society, and also a board member with Sites, who are co-sponsoring or co-hosting our event with us. And so the title of the event is Show Me the Money. Well, actually, first of all, I'd like to just pause and just, hope that, just wish everybody, good health, and hopefully that, everyone's enjoying their time with their family, and hopefully that no one's sick. Obviously, the reason that we're even having a Zoom meeting is because of the, uncertain and surreal times that we're in. So I just wanted to add that. Okay, so the name of the event is Show Me the Money, Navigating Turbulent Times. We've got 4 speakers tonight who will be showing you the different ways that you can generate income throughout your career. And we've also designed it so that you'll have some actionable outcomes, so that, some things that you can possibly take to your office next week, and actually use from our 4 speakers. And then also we want to touch on, networking and how important building and developing relationships are for helping you grow your career. You can be the smartest one in the room, you can know all the technical terms, etc. But if you don't have, people like Jeff, Elizabeth, James, Brian, etc., in your network, it's going to be difficult for you to, or it will be more difficult for you to, access those opportunities that you want to, get into. And so for the course, the way we'll be going today, we'll be starting off with, let's see. We'll be starting off with James Hahn, and James Hahn is going to show you how you can grow your brand online. James was instrumental in growing Drilling Info, i.e. now called Enverus, into the online brand that it is today. Obviously, there were other people that helped it grow operationally, etc. But with regard to their online presence, I'm sure we all see the fantastic things that Drilling Info does online. Then we'll go into entrepreneurship with Jeff Allen. We'll talk about private equity with Brian Matlock, and then we'll go into negotiations with Elizabeth Cambre. So James, if you don't mind taking the stage, please. Thank you. And then finally, I'll just add, we've created a LinkedIn group for you to do some networking. Obviously, with social distancing, it's difficult to network, and so we noticed that with all these Zoom meetings that it's extremely difficult to collect people's information. So after the event, from 7:30 to 8:30, if you would like, we will be hopping onto the Show Me Them, and you can just, if you don't have the link, you can just go on LinkedIn and just type in Show Me the Money, and it'll pull up the search term. It'll pull up the group. Get on the group. What we suggest is, you reach out to people on there. Reach out to 3 people that you don't know. Ask them something about themselves and see how you can add value to them. Don't necessarily try to sell your services, but do try to build a relationship. Introducing Mr. James Hahn II. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. There has to be some technical difficulties because this is Zoom. How do I share my screen?
Casey, if you can allow, thank you, James. Casey, if you can allow James to share his screen, please.
All right, let me take a look here. James, you should be able to in the bottom, in the middle, it should allow you to share your screen.
Yeah, it usually does, and now it doesn't. So
Oh, give me 1 second.
I'm not having the hover.
And whilst we wait for James to
Here we go.
share-
I'm in.
Super.
Wait,
Whilst-
I cannot share while the other participant is sharing. So
All right,
someone
let me
else.
stop sharing mine.
Yes.
All right, now try.
Okay.
There you go. Now it's working.
So where were you in July 2007? I know where I was. I was in Detroit, Michigan, which can alternatively be looked at romantically, and also there's some real stuff that goes on. And I personally found myself at Quicken Loans, a senior mortgage banker, in the epicenter of the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. And I had no idea what I was going to do. All of my thinking was set around low interest rates and my ability to sell mortgages. And then we had a mortgage meltdown and I lost my ability to sell. I couldn't believe anymore. I couldn't force myself to believe that this was something that was ever going to have a future ever again. And thankfully, one of my customers ended up working for AT&T, and he offered me a job doing outside sales as a small corporate accounts manager in 2008 and 9. So I was selling iPhones, and my territory was Detroit, Michigan. And so, hi, this is James from AT&T. Oh, you're sending everybody home on Friday. Okay, sorry to interrupt. That was a normal part of my week. And I lost my ability to believe. And so I quickly exited and got to Texas as quick as I could. And next thing I know, I'm at a company called Enverus, now Enverus, then Drilling Info. And I still had this belief in my mind that I could do something online with this idea that I was working on from before, which is the interim part where I started my first business. But to get to the end of this story, when I got to Texas, everyone was pumping fists and basically being Yosemite Sam around the office because, hell, it's 120, 130, it's going to 140. I can pull up a Forbes article from that exact year where it talks about $200 oil is coming soon and it's not going back down. Now, you might have remembered I said I came from this place called Detroit. So having just lived through this financial bubble, I ended up in Texas hearing people talk like this, and I thought, oh my goodness, this feels like I've seen this movie before. And sure enough, as time went on, I became convinced that I had seen this movie. But I also came convinced of another thing, which is that oil and gas is the greatest industry on earth. It has the greatest people on earth. And also, it's such a huge industry. There's so much money and opportunity at all times, no matter what the oil prices are, because that's how big this industry is. There's always opportunity here. So basically, I ended up shifting my perception from one of, I need a market condition to determine my outcome, to where I shift my perception to being about me and my philosophy and saying, you know what? This is the industry I'm going to be in. Interest rates, I can't control those. The only thing I can control is my actions, and the outcomes are not my business. If I just focus on myself and take responsibility for doing the work, I'm going to get to where I belong. And I ended up in Texas, and I got fired from sales at Drilling Info because I because I wasn't the greatest seller back then, but they made me a technical writer. And long story short, I ended up being in charge of their digital marketing program. I actually built the program. I'm the first person, by the grace of God, is the first person that ever did inbound in digital marketing, content marketing. I introduced that to the oil and gas industry thanks to Alan Gilmer back in 2012. And so this company, if you go out and start searching, I could search for it right now, but regardless, top oil and gas news sites. So yeah, I'll just do it. Top oil and gas news sites. Drilling info shows up right there. So it's why? Because they still put out a ton of content. And so so basically I built that system. And if you've ever heard of the Oil and Gas This Week podcast with Mark LaCour, OGGN, I started that podcast. I was the one that convinced him to do that. So getting to that's enough about me. What about you? And what are the actions that you can take in order to start building your brand? And even what does that mean? And I've been thinking about this a lot lately because there's a lot of people that are talking about you have to build your brand, build your brand, build your brand. But what does that mean? It's not, is it enough to just go out and just talk about anything for the hell of it? No, like we're in here in the oil industry, especially, we're here to create leads. That's what my business does. We create leads. We're your outbound, we're your outsourced marketing department, and we set up shop and we set up your website to convert leads, and then we drive traffic there. And so part of the story that I skipped as well, though, is that I'm just a high school graduate. I have some college. I dropped out of journalism school at Michigan State University, so I'm completely self-taught. And so as a result of being completely self-taught, I thought, why don't I share how you can find your own path and find the brands that you look up to and that you want to sound like and that you want to imitate, so that you can go forward off of this call and start taking some action and start to see the internet completely differently than you ever did before. Does that work for everybody? All right, I'm going to assume that works for everybody.
That works.
Mark, how much time do I have, by the way?
You've got a couple minutes, and then I'm going to ask you a couple questions as well.
Okay, well, all right, let me just burn through this stuff real quick. Here's the point. I have a page on our website right up at the top. You can see it in marketing tools, and it's marketing 101. And basically, here's what you can do is that you can start to find, if you're looking how to build your brand online. I mean, I could spend the next 45 minutes, the next 4 hours, the next 4 days unpacking things for you. But nothing that I could teach you today would be as powerful as you just going out and figuring out how to read through, how to look at some content and say, okay, I see. So convince and convert right here. This is Jay Bear. He's kind of like a true north for me. He's like the guy. He's like the guy that I've always wanted to be when I grew up. And so basically, as soon as I found his podcast, I binged 33 episodes of it, and I've listened to it ever since. And I read every piece of content that comes out, because what you can start to do is you can start to look at it and think about how this is written and why this image is right here. You can basically, what you can do is that you can go out and you can find companies and people that do awesome work that you want to do already, and they're maybe not even obviously not oil and gas people, but what you can do is you could look at the way that they talk, the way that they engage with their audience. Is it more of a casual sort of a sound, or is it more buttoned up and B2B? And finding, basically what I'm showing you here how to do is to what we call in marketing modeling, because you never have to reinvent the wheel. And so I know I'm going to run out of time, and I have to leave some time for, and there's another 4 hours that I could say about this. But basically what I wanted to encourage you to do is to, when you're thinking about building your brand, to not just think about just doing posts on LinkedIn. I want you to think about it bigger, in a bigger picture sense. so that you can start to, instead of just going to the movies, you can go to the movies and see them sort of as a student, and start to think about how this is about how this particular person engages with their audience. And one thing that you start to see if you look at enough of these is that it's pretty much the same format and the same website over and over again. And so that you can start to look at things, to ideas to steal, whether it's the content that's being produced or the colors and the formatting. Everything is nothing's new under the sun. But the key here is not to steal content. Obviously, we're not stealing content. What we're doing is we're trying to take ideas. And so I'll wrap with this, which is something that you can go and do with immediate impact, if I can find it, because I accidentally closed the tab earlier. But basically, where Mark and I met is I've helped, I don't know what it's about, just under 400 people rewrite their resumes for free on LinkedIn over the past month, 6 weeks or so. And as a result of that one post where I just said, hey, send me your resume, I'll copy edit it for you. And, I thought maybe 2 or 3 people would show up, but like 400 people showed up. And so this is the thing. My thing has always been, so what if I helped as many people as humanly possible without asking for or expecting anything in return? And that's what content is about. It's about not shoving your business card down people's throat and trying to convince them that they need to pay attention to you, and that they need to give you their money or buy your products or whatever the case is. Really, the whole point about content is that it's building relationships at scale. So instead of sitting down one-to-one, by producing fantastic content and by teaching well, you can turn those one-to-one conversations into 1 to 100 and 1 to 1,000 and so forth. And so a real practical way to do that is to think, okay, you want to help people in the coronavirus situation and people are out. Don't just go out there and say, hey, let me know how I can help. Your help needs to be exactly like your goals: smart, specific, measurable, attainable. Smart goals, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time-oriented, and so forth. And so I'm not able to find this thing that I want to, but yeah, if you have been laid off, please send me your resume. And you can see that 92,500 people have seen this post so far. And this has gone on in the last 6 weeks, all just because I reached out and I said, hey, let me help you, some of y'all, without asking for it and expecting anything in return. And that's the way all relationships work, right? If this was a DNA marketing event, we would just start to get to know each other and we'd start to help each other. And over time, we'd build relationships. And so if you can do it right online, the beautiful thing is, like I said, is that you can multiply yourself. You can bilocate, if you will, and talk to hundreds and thousands of more people at the same time. So don't know if that helps anyone at all, but I know I have to leave time for Mark to ask a question or two.
Super. Yeah, James. And so James is correct. I found James through this resume post that he had online. I was very intrigued. I looked him up, and then I saw that he was the guy behind, Drilling Info. And I've been following Alan Gilman, Drilling Info online for a while. So James, could you tell us how you can find insights on how your brand is perceived online? Is there a good website that people can go to?
It depends on. So, what are you looking for? Sentiment analysis, or what do you look? Can you unpack that? How do you mean?
So, good question. What is sentiment analysis, James? You got very technical on me.
Sorry about that. Yeah, sentiment analysis is tracing your brand mentions across the internet and then counting the sentiment in using AI and machine learning and so forth to figure out the sentiment in the language, so that when people are talking about your brand, is it mostly negative, mostly positive, in neutral, and so forth. So those kinds of there's definitely share of voice tools out there. I'm not quite an expert in that area to tell you, because it's more of a PR type of a question.
Okay.
But that might give you some things to start Googling.
Sure. So, so for those that want to, the key takeaway there is to Google sentiment analysis. Is that correct?
Yeah, sentiment analysis software.
Okay, fantastic. And then you may have touched on this, but what's the best way to keep a consistent social media presence online? I see what you do on LinkedIn, but
so it helps if you're a middle child and you need attention. But no, the whole thing, it's 100% about consistency. It's about consistency. I was just, my wife, she's never watched Seinfeld before, so we're going through Seinfeld for her first time and my 35th time or whatever. And I'm thinking, man, this is now thought of as the #1 best television show that's ever been produced. And they had no audience for the first 3 years. Seinfeld notoriously didn't get successful until it started to pick up steam in its 4th, and then in its 5th, then it really took off, and now it's legend, right? And so what I'm saying is that what they did is they consistently produced very high quality content, and they delivered it in a consistent time when, I'll tell you, it's Thursday night at 9 o'clock, must-see TV, right? It's been 20 years since it was on television. So what I'm saying is that when you create really high-quality content and deliver it consistently over time, eventually you're going to build those relationships in your audience. Really doing it right online, you can always do it. It happens like a hockey stick within 12 to 18 months. It's always within that window.
Sure. Yeah, one of the influencers I follow online is Gary V, or Gary Vaynerchuk, and he has a Tea with Gary V. And the comment that you just made there is exactly, one of the things that he says all the time. How do you best get to know your target audience or your customers online? What's the best?
Talk to them. Talk to them and ask questions.
Ask questions.
I feel like a lot of marketing people are trying to. Here's the problem with marketing. Most marketing is done by people who have never sold anything. But I've been a failed salesman since I was 18 years old. So, so one of the things you learn in sales is you got to sit down with your customer and talk to them. So, as much as macro audience study is a thing that needs to happen, if you're really trying to get to know your customer, then you just sit down and talk to them.
Fantastic. That's very very human, essentially, of you.
That's what it's all about.
Fantastic. And then what key things do you need to do to understand your own brand, would you say?
So that's a great question. Like I said, I would encourage you to go out there and find all of the different talking heads that are there and shop around, if you will, and find someone that resonates with you that you can follow. I have her over here, Amy Porterfield. I start most people on Amy Porterfield just because she's just such an amazing teacher, and she has her podcast. I say on the link on the page that I feel like I owe her a paid invoice at the end of every podcast, because she's like, hey guys, I did a 7-figure launch last week and here's how I did it. And you're like, wow, okay. But it's all about lifelong learning. And I mean, they made me head of digital marketing at Drilling Info. I had never tried any of the stuff that I had been teaching myself when I got into that position. I was testing. I had a failed business in Michigan, and then I moved to Texas and started working at Drilling Info. And when I started working at Drilling Info, that's all I did was get home and take e-courses and read blogs, because not many people were doing webinars and podcasts. Nobody was doing podcasts back then, right? So it's just reading and signing up for every email list possible. And so I guess like Les Brown, I'd say you got to be hungry and just go after the knowledge.
Nice. So yeah, just if you could quickly give me three takeaways. What are the three things that you did at Drilling Info that created it into, you know, a number one oil and gas online website?
Number one, I would say, is that you need to get buy-in from the top down. If you're thinking about doing some sort of content marketing for your own business, you have to it can't be something that people hate. It has to be, this is a cultural decision that we're making. And so that right there, I would say, yeah, that's the first. And then your network is your net worth. You can't say that well enough. Yeah, I'm still friends with Alan Gilmer, and I'm still and I'm lucky to call a lot of the people that run these different websites and everything. I call them friends now. And so the reason I say that is because I was only put into the position with the trust and lack of experience that I had, because I knew how to communicate with a C-level executive, because I'm a salesman, and I knew what the problem was. And that's one of the, that's probably the third thing, is when you don't just raise problems. When you raise problems, you're a complainer. You raise problems and then solutions. That's what leaders are looking for. So that helps.
Well, James, thank you very much. If you don't mind sharing your LinkedIn in the chat, and then so people can reach out to him as well. And then if you have any questions for James, we do also have a Slido that you can ask him questions afterwards, and then he'll be joining us afterwards. Okay, so next we'll be talking about entrepreneurship with Jeff Allen. Jeff is the incoming president of SIPES, and he's been a member of the Houston Geological Society and for a long time, and is also now like I said, the incoming president of SIPES. Jeff Allen.
Hey guys, Mark, thanks for having me here. Thanks for informing us on social media. I know nothing about that, so that was actually pretty informative. I am an entrepreneur in oil and gas. I drill my own wells. I partner with other people, some of which that might be on this call. We drill conventional prospects. So we find the place to drill in a very simple term, go find the money of the funding. Usually it's private money, so not institution, not bank, not private equity. And we drill those usually in a project. So we don't do one-off. We try to bundle them together and have a more long-term project. So I've had experience in that through SIPES, which is a great organization, probably the best one for entrepreneurs in oil and gas, the one that I will be president of next year, vice president right now. Mark is also on the board there now too. Thanks a lot for helping out, Mark. So networking is huge, knowing the right people and knowing when to spend your time. And so that's why I try to be very conscious of how I'm spending my time, and spending it through SIPES is very important for me and my goals, which is to meet more people that want to drill wells and invest together. Any other questions, Mark? I guess that's it. That's just an intro. Now you take over, right?
Yeah, no problem. So why did you choose to become an entrepreneur, Jeff?
I hate working for other people. That's the most simple answer I could give you. I was kind of forced into it. I'd always dreamed of having my own oil company. I kind of grew up around it and in it. And in the, not the most recent downturn, but the one in 2015, 2016, was when I lost my job like so many other geologists. And I thought I was going for job interviews and just hated it, and thought this is the time to at least try, knowing fully well I'd probably fail. And it took about 360 days to raise the money for our first venture. And since then, it's been pretty successful. So that it was kind of forced, and I'm glad I stuck with it.
So 360 days. Can you detail for us, how you raised the money for your first project and what happened during those 360 days? That's a long time.
Oh, yeah. So I burned through all of my savings, which go by a lot faster than you think. I was cold calling companies. I thought my contact list was pretty strong. I sold about 20% of it in the first week and thought, oh, this is going to be really easy. Did not work that way. And I cold called people. I would get on Google Maps, go to Dallas oil companies, and just call them and get into their doors somehow. I would find a way to get in there. Being on the board of the Petroleum Club helped a lot. Being on the board of SIPES helped a lot. Having a few things, contacts, really does help you get in the door. So a lot of doors opened up for me because of SIPES. For example, 30% of our prospect or our project was purchased through SIPES members. And that was really, really important. And they opened up the door to the other, another 30 or 40%. So we really, you leapfrog connections, and what helps you is doing really good work, being diligent, and like Charles and Linda, their reputation, the people like that, having those people around you, and Mark really help leapfrog you into other circles and people you wouldn't rather know. So I raised it simply cold calling companies, trying to get my foot in the door, give them the presentation, detail what the project is, and then hopefully they would say yes, but most every single time they said no. So it was a fun year.
Super. So my next question is, how important are professional associations, and how important is it to, be involved? What's the difference between just being in a professional association and then being active, and then how important have they been to you, in your entrepreneurial journey?
Great question. And that is very, very important. Being a part of it is great. Like, for example, APG. Being a part of APG is great, but most members, one, don't know each other because there's so many. And then two, most of them are very silent. They don't show up to things. They're not active. They don't want to take the responsibility of a role. And I really urge everybody, from when I was in college, I was active. Actually, I helped bring NeoGeos together and bring it back a long time ago in 2009. So we saw that as a way to start bridging this gap between the older generations and the younger generations and bringing them together. Being active gives you responsibility. People see how you work under pressure, especially in a volunteer position. They get to see how diligent you are, how you work with people and other disciplines. Maybe you're a really good geologist, but can you also manage things really well? Can you manage a project? Can you bring people together? Can you detail through a task? And that's really important. So for me, opening up those doors probably would not have happened if I didn't have the assurance of being on the board of these organizations, where I can call somebody I don't know and say, well, I'm on the board of the Petroleum Club. I'm on the board of SIPES. And most everybody in oil and gas, at least on the independent entrepreneur side, knows SIPES. So I would be able to talk about SIPES. I'd be able to go to a meeting in their city. I'd be able to round up a few people and give them a more specific presentation. So it opens up those doors. If you're just a member, it's great. But if you can spare and push through and be active and be responsible in it, it's just another way of you marketing your skills.
That's fantastic. And then how important is obviously a team is important. How did you find your team, to help you grow your company?
Fantastic. The partnership is just myself and one other gentleman, Mike Jones, Charger Exploration. He's the brains. He's the super geologist that finds all the oil. So I knew my limitations. I knew what I was good at, my strengths, weaknesses, and he knew his. And I had developed a relationship with him from a long, long time ago. In fact, I used to follow him around like a little dog and hope that he notices me. And finally he did. I got on a few boards with him. The Geologic Library downtown, I was on the board of that with him for a while. He was the one that got me on the board of SIPES. And pretty much anything Mike told me to do, I said yes to, because I wanted to be like him. He's older than me. He drills his own wells. He has his own companies. He's very, very successful and has an amazing reputation. And so I tried to really follow in his footsteps. When the bottom fell out of the market around 2015, 2016, I went to him and said, hey, I know you have this idea because we've talked about it over way too many beers. And I said, let's make it happen. Now's the best time. And so his strength was putting together these deals. And my strength was connecting with the money side, or people that have done this, because the company I worked at before, their business model was exactly this: shooting 3Ds, bundling up prospects to drill. So I had an expertise that maybe he hadn't gained yet at that time. And being with the right people in such a stressful environment, like both of us putting everything on the line to raise money, is really important. You get to see the best and worst of people, and choosing who you do business with is definitely the most important thing, especially as you start out. Your reputation is everything. So you really want to know all the names that are attached to your names are ones that you trust. And it can be, take a long time to get the stink off of a bad reputation or a bad person that maybe regret doing business with. So being a member of sites, we don't allow everybody to be a member. And so to be around and safe amongst that group is really important as an entrepreneur, to be able to say, I'm a member of sites, or I've been a member of sites, or I'm active in sites. Same thing with HGS, to be a House of Delegate, to be on any of the board positions, to be a member of NeoGeos. Those kind of organizations help because they weed out the riffraff, and you're able to associate with other people, just like Mark. So it's really important to find the right group that complement each other's strengths and weaknesses, and then also somebody you can trust.
You may have touched on this already, but so who has influenced you in your career the most, and how have they done that?
Man, a lot of people. So as a geologist, as a exploration geologist, Jim Bennett and Randy Schott of BNS Exploration influenced me tremendously, because they were the first ones to look at me in my face and say, you really suck at what you're doing and you need to do better. So that was a fun time. I owe a lot of my geology skills to those guys, especially subsurface mapping. When it comes to operations and learning how to be a competent operator, Weiser Brown operating, Chris Weiser, Richard Brown out of Arkansas, those guys taught me a tremendous amount of being competent as a businessman and being an operation and being comfortable on a rig and knowing what to look for. There's so many that I'm forgetting right now. Paul Hoffman, Alan Hoffman, my dad, Dr. Jim Allen, helping in geophysics. You have to it's like everybody's a book, right? You're just learning as you go, and being so young and being in the industry, I was able to soak up from some of the best people. And that was because I spent a lot of time at HGS, APG, SIPES, trying to find those connections that I could grow from. Because I'm always not the smartest person in the room, and that's how I like it.
Yeah, me too. So I'm going to ask you to give me three takeaways, but then I'm also going to, you've touched on this a couple of times. So in terms of the different associations, are any one more important than the other, or is it more like a gumbo? And why do you?
It depends. If you're a landman, obviously you want to be part of any landman association. If you're an engineer or a stratigrapher, a different type of geologist, you want to focus in those. But for education purposes, I would say APG is the best, or HGS. Obviously, you live in Houston. If you're looking more specifically for business acumen, for people that own their own companies, that are buying and selling deals every day, that talk about business and can help you along the way, SIPES would probably be the best one, in my opinion. Everybody's very welcoming, but it is an organization that is difficult to get into. And that would probably be my best bet between education and business. Those would be the balance.
Sure. And then I'll add, Elizabeth is part of SPE. SPE's educational programs are ridiculous.
Great organization.
Yeah. And then for finding money as well, there's another group called Houston Producers Forum as well. That's another good group. And obviously TIPRO is another good organization. And then IPAA is also Independent Producers Association of America. I think those are also pretty good organizations if you want to network with independent producers as well. So, and then finally, if you could give me three things, three implementable things that can help the independent geoscientists in, growing their business, raising money, or, whatever?
Well, you need to have you need to have a network. So you need to look at the people you're spending your time around. If you're not a part of an organization that focuses on business and entrepreneurship, you need to do that. It doesn't even have to be oil and gas specific. There's a lot of different venture capital groups in Houston. You need to be around people that are always interested in deals and want to look at them. So they will eventually want to look at yours. Even if it's not a good one for them, they'll want to look at it and they might know somebody else. So that's one, networking. Two, you need to put together that team as we spoke to earlier. You have a project or an idea that you want to go find, for this specific example, an oil and gas prospect. You want to increase net worth through finding oil and gas, or maybe you're buying production or pipeline. You need that project to be really, really specific. Who you're working with, what all the steps are that need to be taken to get to your prospect, and the business layout needs to be negotiable, but very well thought out. And three, you need to have the ability to say no to everything else and focus on that deal. If you really want to make a business or an entrepreneur plan happen, you need to push beyond what you might normally think is necessary to create something. It's a lot different than a 9 to 5 atmosphere, but you definitely can do both. You can raise money and have a 9 to 5 at the same time. It's just going to take more time. So you really need the ability to grind and push out there and meet everybody and never say no to meeting somebody new.
Fantastic. Okay, so we heard about the independent operator, and then we would say raising money through venture capital. Now we're going to hear from Brian Matlock. Brian Matlock is the national practice leader of BKD CPAs and advisors. BKD also has an investment banking arm. Brian, I believe BKD is the 12th largest accounting firm in the US. So introducing Brian Matlock. And thank you, Jeff.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. So I'll give the kind of quick and dirty of myself and how I got into energy private equity, so I started my career really at the beginning of the Barnett Shale boom as a young accountant out of college, focusing on audit. And so I started my career focusing on smaller independents that were Barnett Shale focused. Did that for a couple of years, and as most of us on this call maybe remember a company named Enron that happened in 2002. And so in 2003, there was a new law that was written called Sarbanes-Oxley, which required companies to go out and actually document a lot of the controls, procedures that they have around various things. And I drew the short straw, or so I thought at the time, of being put in charge of the 2-year project of documenting the reserve engineering for one of the largest independents in the U.S. So again, this is a young accountant that had no idea about oil and gas, is now in charge of literally going out in the oil field with the team, doing logging, documenting that, talking to the geologists, the engineers, and understanding how that works, all the way to the point of literally fracking the wells. And so through that process, it's been about 2 years, really diving in, reading multiple books on petroleum engineering, even though, again, my background was not in petroleum engineering or oil and gas per se. And then once Sarbanes-Oxley slowed down, I went back into upstream audits and did that for a couple of years. And then again, drew another short straw that at the time I didn't realize how beneficial it would be. But I was asked to join the business valuation practice of the firm I was at. And that was really to focus on upstream valuation. The thought was that I had the upstream background, a petroleum engineering background, to really understand how that drives value. So I did that for a couple of years, and then had the opportunity to shift gears back into audit and really focus on energy private equity, bring all of those together, the operational background, the understanding of valuations, as well as the petroleum engineering, to the point where I actually became a partner at KPMG and was one of their national leaders of the energy private equity group. Subsequent to that, I left, and now I'm at BKD, which, like you mentioned, is the 12th largest firm in the U.S., leading their entire energy practice, which includes consulting, audit, tax, investment banking, transaction services, with offices in Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Pittsburgh, Denver. So we're, from an energy perspective, pretty well covered. We've got about 50 offices in the U.S. But anyway, that's how I dug my teeth into energy private equity, and you know, kind of one of those things, took a risk and did a couple of things that were outside of my comfort zone. And looking back, is, you know, has been absolutely beneficial to me in my career.
Super. Could you, seeing as you're active in the markets, could you give us a brief overview of what you're seeing energy private equity companies are doing at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, they're not doing a lot. It kind of depends on where they are in their life cycle. And what I mean by that is think of funds, energy funds, all have a life cycle, usually 7 to 10 years. And so depending on where they're at in their life cycle, whether at their initial or middle or end, really determines what they're doing right now, or at least their model. So if you have a newer energy fund, you know, I wouldn't say they're happy about everything that's going on, but you know, they look at it as a period of opportunity, a time where they can take advantage of a low market, maybe get some assets out of bankruptcy, those kind of things. If you're in the middle of the cycle, you absolutely are not giddy about anything going on, but you have a focus of, you know, basically weathering the storm, getting past it, keep the assets intact, keep the management team intact, and maybe grow through a couple of strategic acquisitions if opportunity presents itself. If the funds are at the end of the life, those are the ones that are having a challenging time, because that means they would need to exit at a pretty low value in the market, or they're going back to their investors and asking for extensions. So really what we're seeing from a private equity perspective right now is, for the most part, a standstill in the market, because nobody wants to buy or sell assets unless they have to, because of they're going to sell it at a low price. So, you know, at some point, we've seen this before in downturns, it catches up, and there will be a point that, again, whether it's just because the market needs activity or because you start to see bankrupt, there will be activity in the market. But right now, it's pretty much at a standstill.
Thank you for that update. So why do people use private equity as opposed to venture capital? And what's the main...
So yeah, that's a great question. Ironically, a lot of the larger energy private equity firms are actually would tell you they're venture capital, because they register under the venture model with the SEC. There's a venture capital exception that allows them to not be registered with the commission. Meaning that they have certain things. So actually some of the largest ones in the world would actually tell you they're venture capital. But, you know, when it comes to say a private equity model versus venture capital, you know, there's really not a right or wrong answer to that. It just kind of depends on, you know, the nature of what the oil and gas company is doing. When you think of a private equity firm, those are usually for more mature companies that only have a few investment holdings. They want to control the investment so that they can really, the management team can really influence the operations and ultimately the exit value of that investment. Contrast that to venture capital, which generally invest in multiple investments, usually focus more on technology, but most importantly, they only own a small portion. So venture capital generally don't have the significant influence that private equity would. I always use or have heard the baseball analogy that says if you know, one team is private equity and another one is venture capital, and say private equity has 4 guys that come up to bat and they all hit 4 home runs in a row. Venture capital then has 4 guys come up to bat and you get 3 singles and a home run. At the end of the day, you both have scored the same. You've got 4 against 4. You just get it in a different method. So both have solid returns. But venture capital is usually looking for that grand slam versus a home run. But back to your question about energy, I mean, generally most energy funds are going to be structured as a traditional private equity. They want to have control, those kind of things. They do not want to be passive investors. And so that's one of the reasons you generally don't see too much energy leaning towards a venture capital model, unless it's maybe something like alternative energy that has some kind of strange technology that's new and upcoming. But for the most part, they're going to be in a private equity model. Did that answer your question, Mark?
Yes, it did. Thank you very much. And then, so what are the pros and the cons between the two different models? I think you kind of touched on that already, though.
Yes. So, first, most people would say the pros is that it's a lot easier to obtain capital through private equity. I would say that's not necessarily true. It's not always the easiest, especially if it's your first go at getting private equity money. But relative to, say, a public debt or public equity offering with the SEC under the 33 Act, it absolutely is easier and cheaper. So the ease of capital is generally the number one thing that people say. Again, I would argue family office money is probably a little better. The other thing is really the institutional knowledge the private equity groups bring to the table. These groups bring some of the most technically minded business individuals who their sole purpose is to build value. And the reality is, for most in the oil and gas field, they're very good engineers, they're very good geologists, they're maybe not always the best business, have the best business acumen. They may not understand the legal aspects and things like that. And so that's where the private equity guys can come in and really help bridge that gap. As for some of the cons, that is kind of a double-edged sword. On the flip side, you have many management teams that don't really want that influence. They just want the money. They want the private equity groups to write them a check and then back off. They feel like they know what they're doing. And so you have to be ready that the private equity group it's their money, so they're going to be in your business. It's their goal to make you better, but it can be pretty frustrating for management teams. The other thing is a lot just are not ready for the level of controls and sophistication that they have to abide by when they do these private equity deals. Most private equity funds, not all, are registered with the SEC. So we say it's private, in which a lot of people think, okay, it's not a public offering. Well, it's not a public offering in that you and I can't actually go out on the market and buy these. But the private equity fund itself is registered with the SEC under the 40 Act. And so because of that, you do have regulations that you have to abide by and certain protocols. And a lot of times these smaller oil and gas mom and pop guys that want to make it to the big leagues just frankly aren't ready for that level of sophistication. And they really struggle.
33 Act, 40 Act, could you briefly just touch on those, please, for those that don't?
Yeah. So the 33 and 40 Act there's four main SEC acts that they kind of go hand in hand. You've got the 33, 34 Act, and then you have the 40 Advisors Act and 40 Investment Company Act. The 33 and 40 and 34 Act basically establish a company registering its shares with the SEC, and that would be a 33 Act that allows them to actually transact the shares through like NASDAQ or a New York Stock Exchange, and in the open market, anybody can freely buy it. And then the 34 Act is the annual filings that update the investors, the rules around securities and communicating that to investors. 40 Act has to do with investment companies, mutual funds, private equity, venture, hedge funds. That's where the 40 Act comes in, and you have what's referred to as the 40 Advisors Act, and then you have the 40 Investment Company Act, and there's subtle differences between the two. But that's where the private equity groups actually fall in.
Super. Thank you. And then who do you need on your team to do a private equity raise? What kind of team do you need?
Yeah, well, a lot of people. It depends. I would say most people need you're going to need someone to help you with put together your materials, do your road shows, things like that. When you're raising capital, so looking for a placement agent, when you're raising capital in the market and it's your first go through, that's a challenging time. When you get to your second fund and you've been successful in your first, it's frankly a lot easier. You generally go to your previous investors and ask them if they want to invest. But your first one's challenging. And part of that is that the potential investors don't know your name. They don't know who you are. You could have a great track record, but that doesn't always mean you're going to be successful. And you don't necessarily know what you don't know. And so you don't understand security laws. You don't understand how to put together professional pitch book, things like that. So most are going to use what's called a placement agent. And that's somebody that once you raise capital, they get a small piece of that pie. And those placement agents generally will have a full cast of characters behind them. They're going to have people who are savvy with marketing. They have attorneys they use, et cetera. So they're going to have a full team behind them that is ready to support you. So again, it really depends on if it's your first fund, or or do you have a long legacy of success with, and you're going into your second, third, fourth fund. I can't hear you, Mark. I think you're
Sorry, I'm on mute. Yeah, so you touched on this earlier. How important is ambition and networking? And then finally, if you could give us 3 takeaways, your top 3 takeaways, implementable takeaways.
Yeah, so absolutely. I mean, for anybody, for my business, for my career specifically, networking has been everything. I'm fortunate to where I've been and done, and a lot of that was through being able to take risks, but a lot of it was also, I think as Jeff mentioned, being able to raise my hand and sit on boards in associations. I was, and I didn't go through any of this, but I was the former chairman of the North American Petroleum Accounting Conference. I sit on the AICPA's Oil and Gas Revenue Recognition Conference and expert panels, which is, there's 10 of us in the U.S. who they consider top in their field, and we focus on that. And so I've been very fortunate to be associated with those groups, but none of it's through just being a passive member. It's all, through leadership and really making sure that I'm spending a lot of ownership time getting to know the people at the organization and really focusing on them as friends. And then if a business opportunity comes up, even better. But, my theory on networking has always been make a friend first and foremost, make a personal connection with somebody. And once you do that, the business side becomes a lot easier, a lot easier. And so I would say, when you think of networking and ambition, I mean, it's absolutely crucial. Again, I always think of networking as kind of 2 sides, Mark. You have the networking where people are looking for other opportunities and then to jump ship and go somewhere else. But then you have the larger opportunity where I look at it is like-minded professionals that, could be a friendly competitor and you want to compare notes. It could be, again, just a friend. To me, that's absolutely crucial for everybody who wants to be a true professional and step up their game. In regards to you had mentioned like 3, takeaways. I think I've mentioned a lot of them. I mean, don't think of networking as a chore. I mean, think of it as making a friend. Anytime I go to an association or networking, I may lead with my name and who I'm with, but I never lead with, I always say, well, I live in Colleyville, Texas, and I've got so many kids. And you find that personal connection first and foremost. The business stuff will come after the fact because they want to trust you. They want to make that personal connection. The next, don't be afraid to take risks. Get out of your comfort zone. That is crucial to anything that you would do. And then I think number 3 is like I alluded to before and Jeff mentioned, take leadership positions in associations, and not just ones that are technical, things that are business acumen as well. I mean, I know for me, I would say the most 2 beneficial groups that I'm associated with is, I mentioned I'm on the AICPA. Well, that's a very technically driven, where we actually help write standards that the SEC may look at and those kind of things. And I get a lot of, personal satisfaction with knowing that I have a hand in that. But I would say the best networking group for me is a group in Dallas called ATOM, the Adams Energy Forum, the Acquisition, Divestiture, Merger Group. It's a great group of people and made some of the best friends. And it's about energy in general. It's not about accounting. It's not about auditing, tax, the things that I do on a daily basis. And so don't just think of it as a technically driven thing. Look at things that are outside of that, and you're going to be much better situated as an overall professional. So those are my 3 things, Mark.
Thanks. Really appreciate you mentioning Adam. Actually, that's, for people doing independent oil and gas deals, Adam is it's also very hard to get into.
That it is.
But it's a great organization as well. So